We all know who the Simpsons are. It's rare that anybody really doesn't know them or the show or anything like that. It is a well-known series that even though there's still many stories well, about the show itself by the way of lost episode stories. I don't know how to explain this, but I think I might have possibly an experience of this. Already from the title, you must probably assume, well, what is it then? Believe me that this is an experience that has been the most sinister. It all started an hour or so ago. In fact, it was when I was on YouTube watching episodes of The Simpsons when I had honestly found this. Now, I was browsing around for quite some time, already having finished a couple of extra clips from The Simpsons, and I decided that I didn't really have a whole lot to do, so I just kept on looking around. And then I saw a video called The Divorce of Homer and Marge and clicked on it. The episode started normally with the intro and so forth. From that part of Bart leaving the school until Homer is attacked by Marge, the sofa scene is something that I honestly couldn't remember now. Anyway, the episode began at the Simpsons' house, with all the characters eating breakfast, and at that moment Bart explained to Marge that summer was coming soon and he'd like to go on a vacation to Greece. Lisa jokes about the existence of harpies, but then Bart looks at her with more contempt and explains that in Greece, what should worry them is an ultra-right party that aims to expel all the immigrants from the country on the basis of shovels. That joke seemed very out of place since it really wasn't that funny, but I didn't really give it too much importance, and I just assumed they wanted to innovate a little bit more in the show. Then Homer appears and came in very angry and said that he was missing a donut. Marge shows a rather frightened face, and Bart and Lisa get behind the dog. Then Homer begins to scream louder until Marge finally replies, "Shut up, you orangutan!" To which Homer answers with, "You don't scream at me, woman!" They then argue louder, but then the audio came off, and the only thing that I could hear was static. It seemed that Homer was getting very angry, and just when he was going to raise his arm to hit Marge, the audio came back, and Marge is heard shouting, "Hit me if you dare!" Homer retracts the action he was going to commit, and just when he was going to hug Marge, she threatened him with a knife. Homer then walks away and asked him to calm down, that he would never want to harm her. Marge is seen crying and alone, watching TV with Maggie, who doesn't seem to notice the sadness of her mother. Then Flanders arrives and makes the cliché laugh, but upon seeing Marge's expression, he decides to enter the house to find out what was happening. Marge explains that she feels that she plans to leave Homer since she can't stand the relationship when there's no more passion, and she plans to leave Homer for a while. Flanders hugs her and tells her that she could always be friends with the both of them, leave the house, and Marge calls a lawyer to ask for the divorce. The scene changes to Homer at work. Instead of sleeping like he always does, here he looks at tears at a picture of his family. At that moment, Mindy Simmons appears and kisses him. They begin to comment for a long time, and Homer is no longer happy in his marriage. While at school, Bart and Lisa say that lately the family seems to be very distant and intense. Lisa is a little scared that they don't want to be separated, and Bart talks about how positive the divorce was of Milhouse's parents and that they shouldn't worry too much. The scene then changes and we see Homer again at Moe's bar. Here Homer explains to his friend that he plans to leave Marge and that he notices that his marriage is dead, but that he's not capable because he must take care of the family. At the bar, everyone seems to be smiling, suggesting that they really wanted the relationship with Marge to end. Upon arriving home, Marge asked Homer to come up to her room to talk. Homer goes up and seems to have a lost look. They lock themselves in the room and Marge shows her divorce papers, which she already has and asked him to sign it. Homer starts crying and asks for forgiveness for his behavior this morning, and begs that if they go to divorce, they'll be after the children are adults, but Marge doesn't attend to the reasons. Homer starts to break things and hit punches everywhere, and Marge asks him to calm down. Marge gets behind Homer, and this moving abruptly nudges Marge. Marge falls to the ground and faints. Homer then winds up calling an ambulance, and then the scene changed to a hospital. The whole family is in the waiting room, and Homer doesn't stop crying. Bart tells him that in ancient Greece, only the weak and the actors of the dramas were crying, and Homer looks at him with eyes of sorrow. Bart, surprised by this attitude, asked him why he doesn't strangle him, and then a woman in a suit looks at him at that moment. Homer tells him that he's not in the mood. The scene changes to Marge into a hospital bed, and the same woman appears who had looked at Homer and Bart. She introduces herself as the lawyer in charge of the divorce proceedings and asks Marge if she happened to be a victim of mistreatment. Marge responds that Homer is a man with a high temperance, but who would never even remotely hurt a fly. The woman explains that you didn't have to kill a fly to be an abuser, and asked her to dig a little deeper. Several flashbacks play of Homer being violent. Then Marge says in a little aggressive voice, but that his abuser could not be considered. The lawyer answers with something, but the audio disappears again, and gives her a business card and then leaves. After that scene, it changes to Marge meeting with the lawyer, and there's still no audio. They talk, but I could still hear nothing. Doubt corroded me, and I increased the volume, but only static is heard, so I lowered it down again and imagined what they were talking about. In my opinion, they probably could have been talking about something about custody of the children. The scene changes to Homer reunited with Mindy, and the audio appears again. Homer explains to her that he had thought to leave Marge, but he's not able to sign the papers, since it's not what he wants to do. Mindy takes the papers and breaks and rips them apart, explaining that although she knows she will leave Marge for her, she doesn't have to separate from her children. Just when they're about to kiss, Marge calls and tells Homer not to sign the papers. Homer is happy, but then tells Marge that he doesn't want this with his children. Homer gets upset and tells him nothing to separate him from Bart, Lisa, and the child, and hangs up. After that, the scene takes place to a trial, and they're discussing custody. Marge asks Homer to see her children every 15 days, and Homer sees to shared custody. For the side of Marge, they base that Homer is an incompetent and irresponsible father, and Homer tries to deny these affirmations, but it's difficult for him because of a lawyer in a subtle way tries to understand that Homer is a psychological abuser. In the end, Homer loses his mind and starts crying and hitting the table. I expected him to make a joke about food at the time, but it didn't happen, and I already felt sorry for him. A poster comes up 2 years later, and you see Bart and Lisa in a more cordial clothes, and the family with a happier experience. The new man appears in the Simpsons family room and asks with a big smile and a pleasant voice, where's the best wife in the world? Marge appears with straight and smiling hair and said that if not for her, they'd be putting the horns. Everyone in the house smiles. Maggie appears and took off her pacifier and said, hello, sir. And then Father picks up Maggie and answered with a shadow on her face, no, Maggie, say Papa. Maggie shakes her head, smiling, and then the man throws her hand against the floor and shouts, you call me Dad. Maggie starts crying and seemed to have hurt her shoulder. Marge runs to her baby and picks her up. The man orders Marge to leave the baby where she's at, and Marge begins to tremble. Bart gets up from the couch and stands next to his mother and says, you're not our father, and spits in his face. The man, now more infuriated, pokes a punch in the face. Followed by this, Bart falls to the ground and the man begins to get his series of kicks in the stomach. Lisa runs from her room and Marge begs her between tears to leave her son alone. The man agrees and bends down to Bart saying, let's see if you learn who is the boss, with a smile. The scene changes to a totally collapsed Homer lying on the floor of a dirty home. He is observing 2 photos, one of his family altogether and another that is of Mindy. He begins to cry and say to himself, only 6 more days and I can see you again, my children. And then you see blurred images of the head of Lisa, Marge, and Maggie laughing. Homer gets up and goes to the fridge to drink a beer, and hardly notices, but there, Homer no longer has any hair and seems to a little bit more obese than before. The plot continues in Lisa's room, where she's waiting for her diary while she cries. The stepfather comes on stage and sits down next to her. He asks her how the day has gone, and she answers with an insecure tone, that's fine. Then, little by little, the stepfather brings his head close to Lisa and whispers in her ear, would you like to be the little princess of the Pope? Then, the stepfather caresses Lisa's leg with one hand, and she begins to moan. Lisa bites the man's hand and starts running towards the exit, but is captured by the stepfather and is knocked out with a punch. Then, the angle of the episode passes to a point of view of the stepfather who closes the door, and the only thing you could see is the door. The sound explains the rest. You hear Zipper sound and Lisa beg for him not to do it, but then you hear blows and more blows, and you begin to hear the moan of the poor girl. The plan changes to Marge in the living room with Maggie in the background, and you hear the pleas of Lisa, accompanied by cheerful music. It seems that Marge doesn't even flinch, as if she wasn't listening to anything at all. Then it goes to another scene in the basement, where Bart is lying on the floor, naked and has several cuts all over his body. It seems that he still has breathes because he's coughing up blood. It's rather unpleasant. He starts to move and says in a tone full of anger, "You damn bastard," followed by another light cough of blood. Then the scene changes to Homer eating at the Krusty Burger, along with Patty and Selma. They don't know if it was Patty or Selma, tell him that she did nothing. Marge and the new husband seem to be quite well in that, although he was very demanding. He was a good father and of a family. Homer seems to smile a little bit, explains that even so, he's still frightened not only to have a decent life, but also to be able to live with his children and then say goodbye and wish them the best. The scene changes to Lisa leaving the room, but she could barely walk. She falls and starts to cry, followed by the dialogue, "Now I'm dirty," and her body is hugged. Downstairs, Marge puts Maggie in the microwave and turns it on. Maggie starts screaming and sees how the skin of the baby is burning little by little, and how blood comes out of her ears. Bart appears on the scene and manages to get her sister out in time. Then Bart looks at his mother with anger and grabs a knife and threatens Marge not to approach them. She then tells him to do it if he dares, and Bart puts it away and taking Maggie. Then the stepfather appears and kicks Bart. Maggie falls to the floor and breaks her neck. It seemed that Maggie had finally died. The scene changes back to Homer. His burger is running out and he goes to his car. He looks up to heaven and asks God to take care of his children while he struggles to be with them. Then the screen turns black and the credits appear with the melody they always have. The video was changed for another, one of Father of Family. I think it was a joke about a lobster Iraqu or something like that. I wasn't interested in that and removed the YouTube window. I was reflecting for a little while and wanted to believe that this chapter would have been a joke in bad taste of the fan of The Simpsons or something like that. However, something's been going on in my head for a while, and I just can't stop thinking about it. Precisely right now, I've seen on the news about a family with the same situation as The Simpsons in the chapter, and according to what the younger daughter testifies, her family was fine until she saw, well, the chapter The Simpsons, the divorce of Homer and Marge. I don't know if it's completely true, but I might have my head at 100%, and I really just don't know what to do. I honestly hope that every single thing that I just seen was nothing else more but a freaking lie. I honestly hope it is. Hello there, my little shadows. It's me again, your master, the Shadow Reader. I hope you all enjoyed this little tale of horror. I honestly hope I didn't traumatize you too much after this. If you're new here and want to become one of my little shadows, then hit that subscribe button down below, and also make sure to turn on post notifications so that you can be the first to watch my brand new content when it comes out. Until then, sweet dreams, my little shadows.